I'm going to be talking about the Sikh community and the Muslim community and the interconnections, both historically and in the present day. And I'm going to start with a quote. And this is a quote from the Sikh scriptures, the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the current guru, the living guru, and the eternal guru for the Sikh community. And the quote is this: it's Awal Allah Noor Upaya Kudrat ke sab bande Ek noor te sab jag upje kon palle kon mande. In the beginning, Allah God created light, all our nature's creations, or people. From that one light, the whole world was created. So how can some be good and some evil? Now, you could be forgiven for thinking this could easily be a quote from any of the Islamic scriptures. For example, it could have been from the Quran, it could be from the Hadiths. This is a writing by a 15th century Sufi saint called Kabir, and his teachings as a Muslim, as a Sufi, are contained within the Sikh scriptures. So, knowing that as the starting point, it shows that there's already a close relationship between the Sikh community and the Muslim community in that respect. Guru Nanak was born in 1469. He gained enlightenment around 1500, and he went traveling to spread the word of unity of existence and the oneness of God. The one person who accompanied him for about 27 years of those travels, and these were travels all around South Asia, throughout Central Asia, through to the Middle East, and some people think perhaps beyond, was a guy called Mardana, a friend of his from his village, who happened to be a Muslim and remained a practicing Muslim until he died. He was also, and he is considered by Sikhs to be one of the first disciples and one of the first students of Guru Nanak. Despite the fact that he remained a Muslim throughout, he was also Sikh in that he was following the philosophy of Guru Nanak whilst remaining true to his own religious identity. And I think looking at religion from today is quite easy to get confused about, well, how can someone be one faith but also be willing to engage and practice and work with other faiths? And I think what we lose is this idea of kind of the fluidity of religious identity that existed, particularly within South Asia, up until, say, the mid-19th century, where one could easily belong to, say, I can be a Sikh, but I could still go to visit the Sufi shrines in Punjab, go to pay my respects at a mandir, but I would remain true to my own faith because I knew I was Sikh, just as Muslims could do the same, Hindus could do the same. And I'll come to that later as to why things changed and how they've changed and why we've ended up in the position that we are in the present day. Guru Nanak also went to Mecca. He visited Mecca, and whilst he was there, there's one of the stories about him. One of the accounts is that whilst he was there, he stretched out his legs. His legs were pointing in the direction of Mecca. One of the imams in the area came up to him and said, "How dare you? You're causing a sacrilege. You shouldn't be doing that." And Guru Nanak's response was, "Well, point my feet where God does not exist." A simple response, but one that was effective. As I've said, the Sikh scriptures contain teachings from Kabir. They also contain teachings from Farid, who's another Sufi saint of that medieval, early modern South Asian period. When you look at the Sikh community, you need to look at it in the context of Mughal India and the Mughal Empire. The Mughals invaded India in around 1526 or thereabouts. And it was a very quick invasion. Over the course of about 2 or 3 years, the Mughals had captured the whole of northern India very quickly, very decisively. And it caused challenges for the local communities. And at the same time, the Sikh community was only just starting out. Sikh as a faith, Sikhi as a faith had only existed for about 26 years by the time the Mughals had invaded. And so there were lots of discussions about how those relationships can be managed. And over time, it led to almost a power struggle between the Sikh community who wished to keep their identity strong and intact, and the Mughal Empire, particularly under Aurangzeb, who wanted to ensure that there was uniformity throughout the empire. And so within that context, you found that the Sikh community was fighting the Mughals, but also experiencing a challenging time within itself when it was developing. The Khalsa was created by the 10th Guru, and that was the idea that there needed to be an armed force to deal with this challenge from the Mughal Empire. Interestingly enough, when it came to the Mughals, the Gurus made it very clear that their fight was with the Mughal Empire, not with the Muslim community. Again, that's something that people misunderstand and misconstrue in the present era. But during that time when there was fighting against the Mughal Empire, there were Muslims who joined the Sikh forces in order to fight the Mughals for similar reasons to the Sikhs. It was primarily Shia Muslims who got involved in that fight and tried to fight for their own right to exist. As I've said, there are several people of Muslim heritage who are respected and venerated within the Sikh faith. Those include Muslims who spoke out against the Mughals and spoke out in favour of the Sikh community, Muslims who fought with the Gurus in battle, Sufi saints who supported Sikh ideals or saw parity in Sikh philosophy with their own worldview, and close Muslim friends of the Gurus. We then cut forward to about by 200 years, and we're now in the early 19th century. Maharaja Ranjit Singh, Maharaja and Emperor of the Sikh Empire, which stretched from just the outskirts of Delhi all the way to Kabul. It was a massive area, and it's considered by many to be the golden era of Sikh-Muslim relations, particularly in Punjab. There were many Muslims and courtiers, many Muslim courtiers and ministers within the empire, the most famed being the foreign minister for Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who was Hakim Azizuddin. There was also the head of the treasury and the head of the arsenal were also Muslim. So there was a strong period of this interconnectivity, intersectionality, one could argue. Then came the British Raj. And the British Raj changed things dramatically. Under the British Raj, it was very difficult for Brits to understand how it was possible for one person of one faith to remain true to their own faith but still go and pay their respects at places of other faith communities. That led to almost a pigeonholing of identity. And because of that pigeonholing, Muslims were told in South Asia, right, you are Muslim because you believe in X, Y, and Z, and so you should only be doing these things, and let's ensure that the laws are created in such a way that they apply only to you. You're Hindu, so this is how you should behave. You're Sikh, this is how you should behave. And it was an exercise in control. It was an exercise in ensuring that a few thousand people can control a land of 300 million. And it worked extremely well, but under that divide and rule aspect, it meant that faith communities that had previously been very strong and very strongly connected started to lose those connections. Those connections became weak, and those connections were weakened even still by the independence of India, the partition of Punjab and Bengal, and really the horrors that were experienced during partition, where there were, from what I understand, there were 14 million people who were displaced during that period of time, Hindu, Sikhs and Muslims almost exclusively. Between 1 and 2 million of them were killed. Some were killed by members of their own communities, members of their own families, under the premise of ensuring that their community remains intact and unsullied by keeping their women safe by killing them, which is frankly absurd. But those horrors remain. So if one goes to Punjab now, Indian Punjab, you'll find that whilst the shrines are still there, the Muslim Sufi shrines, whilst they're still respected, the one thing that really comes to mind is the horrors of what happened when Sikhs and Hindus were leaving Pakistani Punjab to come to India, and Muslims were leaving India to flee to Pakistan. those horrors remain to the present day, which is why last year, seeing the commemorations and seeing the various discussions that were instigated by BBC documentaries was so heartwarming, to see that people are actually finally willing to talk about the horrors, but do it in a way that starts healing the wounds, because it's still fresh. It's in people's living memory. In Britain today, the Sikh community and the Muslim community have various connections, but also various divisions. And this is something to be very clear about. The communities are divided by misunderstandings and misconceptions. Now, members of the Khalsa, if you're initiated into that part of the faith, then you keep uncut hair, you don't cut your beard if you're a man, you carry 5 articles of faith in total, one of which is a dagger. And it's a dagger that's kept on you at all times. I was asked by somebody at an interfaith leadership course that I did years ago, where he was a Muslim guy. He felt comfortable enough to ask me this question, but the question itself was slightly shocking. And the question was, is it true that if an initiated Sikh who carries a dagger, if the dagger is unsheathed, is it true that you need to cut a Muslim and drink their blood? And so, yeah, those are the kinds of misconceptions which may seem like completely over the top and absurd, but there are people out there who think that. Similarly, I've heard some other things being said about other faith communities, and I'm sure you may have heard this one as well, where there are, again, this was somebody telling me about going to a shoe shop somewhere in Brent Cross shopping centre, and somebody's wearing the kippah, and the woman behind the till who's serving, who was, I think she may have been wearing a hijab, she said something along the lines of, is it true that underneath your kippah you keep your devil horns, and that's why you have to keep it on your head at all times? So it's those sorts of misconceptions that you get in all faith communities. Sadly, they're there, but we need to be able to challenge them whenever we see them. There's also the fear of the other. And as part of the fear of the other, it's the idea of, well, this is our community, that's your community, we know who we are, why should we interconnect and speak to you? There are also then grooming concerns, and this is something that I've seen rising within the Sikh community not recently, for the last 20, 25 years, where there are instances of Sikh girls and women who convert to Islam, and the Sikh community or people within the community are fearful about the fact that the girls have converted, and so there's a campaign to convert all women or many women within the Sikh community to Islam. Some of those conversions may be forced conversions. Some of them may be done out of the fact that someone's fallen in love with somebody of a different faith. Sikh girl's fallen in love with a Muslim guy, wants to get married. So it's that sense of, when there are instances, and the most recent incident was somebody who then became effectively was training to become a member of IS, of Daesh, who was Sikh heritage and who had converted very recently. I think this was in the news just about a month ago, and the prosecution took place in Coventry. So that's led to another rise in concern about Sikh women being affected and being converted forcibly. And then there's also food issues. Halal food is prohibited within the Sikh community, and if Sikhs who eat meat do want to eat meat, they're told it has to be jatga, which is a dharmic way of killing, which is a swift blow and a straight blow with a very sharp edge, very sharp blade. And then there's also historic gang violence, which took place between Sikhs and Muslims in Slough and Southall about 15, 20 years ago. So there are those divisions, but then there's also the connections. And the connections are, sadly, as a result of Islamophobic attacks, Sikhs being confused for Muslims and being attacked. So as a community, Sikhs are possibly attacked more than any other faith community apart from the Muslim community when it comes to Islamophobic attacks. There's also the fact that in post-Brexit Britain, what is our identity? Who are we as communities? We're being challenged by the hijab and turban ban in France. there are attacks on unique identities, and we're united by the fact that we look different in many respects. And those connections between the communities are also strong in Punjab. You have to look for them, but they are still there. So I was in Amritsar about 7 years ago, and it was just the night before Eid al-Adha. And I saw fireworks outside the Golden Temple, not part of the Golden Temple complex, but from within the Muslim community. The following day, there again, and I noticed that there were two men wearing kurta pajamas, again wearing skull caps, Muslim men who had decided that on the day of Eid they wanted to go to the Golden Temple and pay their respects. And so they spent about half an hour in the precinct, in the area, and then they went back to their own private celebrations with family and friends. So there is that real sense of unity and that sense of respect. And in fact, when I was in Amritsar very recently accompanying the Mayor of London, he spoke of his own grandparents having paid their respects in the Golden Temple prior to partition. Now, really the issues that we need to deal with as two communities who have a lot in common but also are unique and different is that we need to be able to talk about our differences and also celebrate them. And it's easy for people of faith to start to feel insecure about their respective positions in society, especially when there feels to be perceptions of attacks from all quarters and the fears of the erosion of identity in the great big melting pot that is modern Britain. There's a lot for us to learn. There's a lot for us to work together on as communities. And I think there's a lot that we can rejoice in if we work together and if we find those commonalities, but also celebrate the differences. So hopefully I've ended on a positive note. Thank you.